Kyle Traeger sat in silent frustration for a good 5 minutes after the car sputtered to a stop on the side of the road. He'd been watching the miles, and despite the broken fuel gauge, was confident he'd have enough gas to reach his destination. The night sky appeared much brighter just over the horizon. Mourning Glory couldn't be more than another 2 miles, and there would undoubtedly be a gas station at the edge of town. He could call for help, of course, if he hadn't killed his phone's battery on the drive over.
Damn it,
he said, removing the keys from the ignition. A cool breeze blew through the trees and over the cracked pavement. It was the first thing Kyle noticed upon climbing out of his coupe. He was thankful for that, at least. The second thing he noticed was how quiet it was. That part didn't sit well. He closed the car door and groaned as he double-pressed the lock button on his key fob. The ensuing blast of the horn caused him to jump, and it became apparent that his anxiety was trying to become a problem. Kyle took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He scanned the desolate stretch of highway ahead, its asphalt expanse winding through the darkness. There were no cars, no pedestrians, not even a distant streetlight.
That's just great,
he muttered to himself. With a resigned sigh, Kyle began to walk. The rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath his sneakers was the only sound as he trudged along the empty road. The night was eerily quiet, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced at his wristwatch, its luminous hands indicating that it was 8:47. Mourning Glory felt like a distant dream as he continued his solitary journey. The stark beauty of the rural landscape was lost on him. All he wanted was to reach the gas station, fill up his tank, and put this unexpected pit stop behind him. As he walked, his mind wandered. Kyle had always been the cautious type, the one who planned for every possible scenario. Yet, here he was, stranded in the middle of nowhere, with both his car and his phone out of juice. He couldn't help but berate himself for not having a backup plan. Kyle's footsteps echoed through the desolate foothills as he made his way toward town, his mind wrestling with the mysterious voicemail his brother Zane had left that morning. The urgency in Zane's voice had set off alarm bells in Kyle's mind, and the repeated attempts to call back only led to a disheartening message about the number being out of service. The darkness of the road seemed to mirror the uncertainty gnawing at Kyle. As he crested a hill, the distant glow from Mourning Glory painted the horizon. It was then that he noticed the haunting silhouette of a man standing against the backdrop of the town's faint illumination. The slow, deliberate wave of the man's hand felt like a spectral greeting, which made Kyle's blood run cold. The figure turned and began walking towards the town, disappearing over the hill. The mysterious encounter intensified Kyle's concern for his brother, now accompanied by an unsettling sense that the road ahead held more secrets than he dared to imagine. When he finally reached the town, Kyle was met with a disconcerting sight. The sign once welcoming visitors to Mourning Glory had been defaced. Mourning, with an MOU, was spray-painted above the town's name, an ominous alteration. Kyle's concerns deepened when he arrived at the gas station, only to find it deserted. The eerie stillness, the enigmatic stranger on the horizon, the vandalized sign, and now the empty station, all signs, clearly pointing to something being terribly wrong in Mourning Glory. The neon lights cast an eerie, flickering glow over the deserted pumps. He looked around, half expecting someone to appear, but there was no one.
Hello?
Kyle called out, hoping for a response, but there was none. He pressed on, moving farther into town. Streetlights illuminated the deserted streets. His watch now read 9:25, certainly not late enough for the streets to be empty. The town had a strange stillness about it that felt almost sentient. And then, walking past a small diner, he saw a lady, an actual human being, wiping down tables. The place looked inviting, and this was apparently one of 2 other people out and about in the entire town, assuming he hadn't imagined the first. So Kyle decided to enter the diner, the bell above the door, jingling softly. The diner was well lit, and the counter was lined with empty stools. The lady walked behind the counter and tossed her wet washcloth underneath. Her apron was stained with flour. She looked up as Kyle approached.
Evening, stranger.
She greeted him with a warm smile.
What can I get for you?
Relieved to find some semblance of normalcy, Kyle took a seat at the counter.
Just a cup of coffee, please.
The woman nodded and poured him a steaming cup. As she set it in front of him, he noticed the name tag pinned to her apron. Her name was Shay.
Thanks.
He said, taking a sip of the hot coffee. It was strong and comforting, just what he needed. Shay, who looked to be a few years older than him, leaned on the counter, her eyes studying him curiously.
You're not from around here.
Kyle shook his head.
No, just passing through. My car ran out of gas a couple miles out.
She nodded sympathetically.
Happens to the best of us. Lucky for you, you made it to Mourning Glory.
Kyle couldn't help but notice a hint of sarcasm in her voice as she mentioned the town's name.
Is everything okay here?
He asked cautiously.
It seems quiet.
Shay sighed, her gaze distant.
Mourning Glory used to be a bustling little town, but that was a long time ago. These days, it's little more than a ghost town. A lot of people left and never came back.
Why?
He asked. Shay hesitated, as though choosing her words carefully.
There are stories, you know. Strange happenings. Some say the town is cursed.
Kyle's curiosity was piqued.
Cursed? How so?
She leaned in closer, her voice hushed.
Whispers of things in the night, shadows moving about, voices you can't quite place. It's enough to make anyone want to leave.
He couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease.
And you, why do you stay?
Shay offered a sad smile.
I actually live outside of town, but unfortunately I've got everything tied up in this place.
Kyle finished his coffee, a mixture of fear and intrigue swirling within him. He thanked Shay for the drink and paid the bill. As he made his way to the door, she called out to him.
Be careful out there, stranger. Mourning Glory has a way of changing people.
The words lingered in the air as Kyle stepped back into the night. The town remained quiet, its streets devoid of any signs of life. Resigned to investigate further, he started walking again, determined to search for any sign of his brother. His anxiety intensified when he discovered a leather jacket hanging over a nearby stop sign. He had already walked past this sign once. The jacket had not been there. It was identical to one he had given Zane for his birthday earlier in the year, and something in Kyle's gut told him this was no coincidence. It felt like a warning. He returned immediately to the diner and walked inside to find a man holding Shay at knife point behind the counter. The ominous figure, draped in tattered attire and adorned with sinister face paint, hissed,
I have a message from Zane.
Kyle, a knot tightening in his stomach, cautiously inquired.
What is it?
A nervous tremor echoed in his voice. Ignoring Shay's silent pleas for caution, he pressed for answers. The man, a twisted grin stretched across his face, taunted.
Are you sure you want to know?
Shay, desperate to avert disaster, whispered.
Please, don't do this. I have children.
The man's laughter echoed in the air, a haunting soundtrack to the impending danger.
So do I,
he said. Swiftly and unbeknownst to the intruder, Shay seized a pencil from the counter. Kyle demanded.
What do you know about my brother? Did you do something to him?
The man, reveling in the suspense, cryptically replied,
I told you he has a message for you.
Kyle's anger reached its boiling point and he thundered,
Tell me!
In a desperate act of self-defense, Shay plunged the pencil into the man's thigh. He howled in pain, momentarily releasing her from his grasp. Exploiting the opportunity, she seized a pot of scalding coffee and hurled it into his face. The searing liquid met its mark, and Shay and Kyle fled the diner. Outside, they reached Shay's car, only to discover all 4 tires flattened. A sinking realization gripped them.
No.
Shay whispered in despair. A nightmarish parade of menacing figures advanced from down the street, leaving them no choice but to sprint in the opposite direction. They ran into a desolate alley. Seeking refuge behind a dumpster, they huddled in the shadows, breaths stifled. Playful voices echoed in the night, calling out for them. Spotting a partially open window, they shared a glance, silently strategizing their escape. They gingerly pushed the window further open, wary of the noise. Crawling through the narrow opening, they closed the window behind them, sealing off the outside world just in time, as one of the figures, axe in hand, crept into the alleyway. He walked past the window, peering inside for a moment before moving on. Whispering urgently, Shay declared,
I have to get to my kids.
Do you have a phone?
asked Kyle.
In my purse,
She answered.
under the counter, in the diner.
Kyle sighed, the gravity of the situation weighing on him as he asked.
What the hell is happening here?
Shay, her voice a tremor of fear and uncertainty, unraveled the town's grim secret.
I only know of the rumors, the things I already told you. Something happens to people here. Something that changes them.
Kyle, grappling with disbelief, sought understanding.
What are you talking about?
He asked.
The man that walked by the window,
She explained.
his name is Fred Winston. He's a regular at my diner. He was a sweet guy. Married, kids, and now he's wielding an axe looking for us.
Kyle still couldn't comprehend the situation,
Something is literally changing people,
said Shay.
turning them into that.
How is that even possible?
He questioned. Shay, her eyes reflecting the terror within, confessed.
I don't know. Whatever it is, before today, there were only a few who changed. Maven Levine, Ronald West, Delia Gray.
She traced the ominous progression.
This morning, everything seemed basically fine. Then over the day, I noticed fewer people coming into the diner. Less activity outside the windows.
Kyle, haunted by the revelation, shared his own fears about Zane.
My brother Zane is here somewhere. He left me a message this morning asking me to tell our parents he loved them.
He revealed with a heavy sigh.
He sounded scared. Really scared. I have to find him.
Determined, he stood, ready to face the unknown. Shay's hesitant plea lingered in the air.
But what if he...
Undeterred, Kyle pressed forward, slipping into the next room, and Shay followed. Peering through a new set of windows, they hesitated, assessing the scene before them. A distant fire flickered to life, casting an orange glow on the surrounding buildings. Another blaze ignited across the street, ominous flames dancing in the night. Kyle, recognizing the urgency, declared,
They're trying to burn us out. We have to move.
Shay cast a concerned gaze.
You said your car was a couple miles outside of town?
She asked. Kyle, a sense of dread settling in, admitted.
With an empty tank.
Shay, eyes fixed on the desolation beyond the window, whispered.
I know where we can get gas.
Armed with weapons found in the building, a lead pipe for Kyle, and a ball-peen hammer for Shay, they ventured outside, hidden behind crates and wooden pallets. As one of the assailants approached with a gas can, Kyle attacked, his pipe landing a fatal blow. Kyle hesitated, standing over the lifeless man, struggling with what he's just done, but he pushed it away, feeling his brother was depending on him. The gas can, half full, held the key to their escape.
I can't leave without my brother,
he said, removing his car key from his coat pocket.
Our best bet is for you to get to my car, get your kids, and call for help. Send everyone you can.
He placed the key in her hand and closed her fingers around it.
Please come with me,
She said. Another voice, playfully ominous, echoed from down the street. Shay could see a female figure, skipping along carrying a knife. She knew immediately that it was Delia Gray, who local police had been looking for since the week before, after she had murdered 3 people.
We have to move,
Said Shay.
right now.
Shay and Kyle ran toward the opposite side of the building, hiding behind crates and wooden pallets. Reaching an open door that led to another room, they peered inside, spotting a man standing in the center.
Zane.
Kyle whispered, the realization dawning on him. Shay placed a hand on Kyle's shoulder, as if to hold him back.
Wait,
She urged.
this feels like a trap.
I know,
He said.
but he's my brother.
Kyle left the gas can at her feet, holding her hand briefly, and said,
I came in on 37. Go that way. Past the sign for Mourning Glory about 2 miles down the road. My car is there.
Shay pleaded for him to stay, but he was insistent. With a final look, he ventured into the room where Zane waited, his heart pounding in his chest.
Zane?
He called out in a shaky voice. Zane stood there, motionless as a statue.
Zane, what's happening here? What are you doing?
Kyle asked, taking cautious steps closer to his brother. A big, almost inhuman smile spread across Zane's face, and he slowly began to wave, just as the mysterious figure had done when Kyle first arrived. That had been Zane all along, and Kyle felt the dread creeping over him.
It's time, little brother.
Said Zane. Before Kyle could react, he found himself surrounded by menacing figures, emerging from the shadows. It was indeed a trap. and he had walked right into it. Outside the room, Shay could only watch in horror as the events unfolded. She knew she couldn't help, couldn't save Kyle from whatever was about to happen. She watched in helpless horror from outside the room as Kyle fought against his attackers. He landed blows with the pipe, but he was quickly overwhelmed. The figures relentlessly bludgeoned and stabbed him, the room illuminated by flashes of light glinting across their weapons. Devastated, and on the brink of tears, Shay took the gas can and quietly retraced her steps through the building to the window they had used to enter. Before she could crawl back through, the high-pitched, playful voice of Delia Gray called out behind her.
There you are, you silly goose.
Shay knew she couldn't avoid the confrontation, so she squared up to fight.
Now we can play,
Delia said with a maniacal laugh, before lunging at Shay with her blood-stained knife. Shay managed to dodge the first attack, and she swung her ball-peen hammer with force, striking Delia across the back of her head. Delia staggered, blood streaming down her back, before laughing again and saying,
You're good at this game.
But Shay wasn't about to play along with Delia's sinister rules. Her children's faces flashed in her mind, and as Delia was turning back toward her again, Shay struck her once more with all her strength, this time in the temple. Delia dropped her knife before crumbling to the ground. Gasping for breath, Shay grabbed the knife and crawled back through the window into the alley, knowing that she had to get out of that town as fast as possible. She remained in the shadows, vigilant for any sign of pursuit, and finally made it past the Forsaken Town's welcome sign, following Kyle's directions. She couldn't help but glance back at Mourning Glory, where the night sky blazed with flames. In the glow of those engulfing flames, the twisted inhabitants of Mourning Glory reveled in a chaotic dance, a macabre celebration fueled by the dark forces that had claimed the town. Their silhouettes, adorned in tattered and blood-soaked garments, moved frenetically, casting grotesque shadows against the flickering firelight. Zane, now a puppet to the darkness, led the wicked waltz with an inhuman grin. As they danced, an unholy chorus of manic laughter echoed through the night, a perverse hymn to the unhinged delight of those cursed souls. In the distance, the flames painted a ghastly vision, their wicked dance continuing beneath the ominous glow of the night sky. Shay's intuition told her that their evil would persist, a sinister party that she had narrowly escaped, leaving behind the echoes of chaos and suffering in Mourning Glory. She could only hope that Kyle would be the last of the town's victims. A half hour later, she reached his car and emptied the gas can into its tank. The evil in the town remained an enigma, but Shay had escaped its clutches. She started Kyle's car and sped away from that dark place, thinking only of reaching her children and finding help for a town that could only be mourned.